Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Living Astrology with Janet Hickox. Grab your cup of coffee or your tea, sit back, and let's chat about what is happening up in the stars above this week. A bit of a crazy week, if you ask me, even though it's full of potential. It's full of potential good. It's full of potential exciting. It's full of potential for change and also so much possibility for upsetting things to happen as well. But of course, upsetting things are opportunities, right? That can lead us to something new, to a new way of being. So in that case, we are definitely in need of being respectful of the energies of this week for sure. So this morning, the way we're going to work this is we're going to talk a little bit about the moon in this morning because she is in the void at the moment, and will transition later this morning, early afternoon for those of you in the Eastern time zones. And she will be moving into the sign of Cancer, a sign she rules. So we'll want to talk about that. And as well, we begin the new Human Design Week. So I want to be able to talk about that. And this is the week before, we meet again on Friday. So before that point in time, we have the new moon, and it's a pretty good, decent moon. And I want to be able to talk about that and the rest of the energies for the week. So tell me how everybody's doing this morning. How was your weekend? I see Christine Buckingham out there, and good morning to Debbie Tibbetts-Tumiel and Pam and Amy D. It's good to see everybody. I know, Amy, we haven't seen you for a while, so it's good to see you out there. And awesome, Tanya, good morning to you as well. And good morning to all of you out there who may not be checking in with us yet. So this is a week as we look, I think it's the anticipation, right, of the week that has me more interested than the actual things. Like if I take the things one by one, they don't seem so exciting. Maybe they do. Yeah, they do. But if I take those things one by one, maybe they don't seem to add up to as big of a deal as they are. But when we step back, from next week's perspective, when we look back at this week, we're going to see that this week was sort of a fulcrum point where change would be taking place. And you can almost feel it, you can sense it. And of course, it's a new moon week as well. So we have all of this potential for something new to be expressed, and for our ability to, especially in Leo, to exert our creative presence out in the world. So good morning, Monique, and good morning, Debbie. She says next 2 weeks. Yep, next 2 weeks, right? Actually, yeah, no, I'm not going there. August is a good month. They're always good months. They just have these different energies associated with them. August has a let's just call it a busy astrological month, okay? Especially because we're going to be getting settled into new energies that technically begin July 31st. So we have the new moon, and then a couple of days later we have the nodes shifting into a new set of gates, and that's going to change up the life path trajectory. And I think August then becomes a process of our getting used to these new energies. And we're going to, of course, talk more about those as well. But let's begin with where we are today. We are still sitting with the moon in Gemini, one of my favorite places where we have opportunities for conversation, for socialization, for hanging out with people, for using our minds in positive and stimulating ways. But it's also in the void. And the void, of course, moon, that's the technical name, the void, of course, moon. It's kind of a wandering moon in that there are no new connections the moon is making between now and the end of the cycle in Gemini when she moves into Cancer. So without any new energy being, stimulated or put into play, things feel a little bit like they're wandering or going no place fast, right? That's kind of that feeling sometimes of things not moving very fast at all. And that can be difficult on a Monday anyway, because Mondays, don't you feel kind of like Mondays are hard to kind of get the things going, to get things moving? So you have a wandering moon, you have a Monday, and for a good chunk of the country, it's very warm And so we have some of that lethargic sort of feeling energy. But that's okay. As things begin to shift later in the day today, we're going to move to the moon's own rulership of the sign of Cancer. And see, that happens at 10:54 a.m. Pacific time. So that'll be 1:54 for those of you on the East Coast and the time zones in between. It'll come at the end of the day for those of you in the universal time zones. And that means most of your workday was spent likely with the moon kind of wandering. So I think we on the West Coast have the best part, meaning the afternoon things will start to be a little better, a little busier, a little bit more able to push ourselves in some kind of direction. And I see a whole bunch of people joining us now. Erica Dorsey, good morning. J-Lo, hello. Kajella, hello. Julie Kiss, it's good to see you. And let's see, Erica, I'm a total Monday person. I've always loved Mondays. I wonder if you, like me, were born on a Monday. Monday's child, right? So let's look at the energy of Cancer and what does that tend to bring us to. So first of all, we know Cancer as the sign of the mother, right? So it's an energy about mothering, taking in things like nurturing and caretaking or caregiving. It is also a very protective energy. So, mama bear kind of energy, protective, but also willing to give emotional balance and to bring intimacy into the picture, to make soul connections. So I always think of Cancer energy as the soul to soul kind of connections that we make with people in our family. Cancer rules the family. Also the traditions that we have in the family, but community is also important here. So family and community are words that are sort of interchangeable. But we are, looking at how it is that we belong together in a group. So there's also the needs here. Cancer is a sign of needs, and one of our human needs is to belong, right? To be a part of a family, or to have people around us that love and support us, that we also want to love, nurture, and support. So the Cancer energy brings us to that level of connection. You were born on Thursday, Erica. That's interesting too. But Monday's not a bad day. It really depends on your attitude, right? Monday can be a bad day if you want to make it a bad day. It always just seems funny to me though, because the energy on Mondays feels a little bit like having to start fresh, right? Like I wake up Monday morning going, is it Sunday? Can I sleep in? But no, I had to get up, right? Get up and get ready after 2 days of getting to do whatever I wanted to do. And anyway, let's go back to Cancer. Intuitive energy. Cancer is the first water sign, and the water signs tend to be more intuitive, more open to instinctual awareness. Maybe that's more it than intuition is, instinctual awareness. And that instinctual awareness is something that we are all gifted with as being human beings, right? It was the earliest form of knowing that we had as human beings. And that instinctual awareness provoked our being able to prepare for the seasonal shifts, to prepare to have enough food, to know when danger was about, to know when it was right timing to act and when it was not. So instinctual awareness is something that is inborn, right? So Cancer sort of provides us with that inborn intuition or that instinctual awareness. We might also call it body wisdom. And we sort of moved away from that body wisdom over time, especially as we became more mind oriented, as we moved into the Renaissance period of time that began the scientific revolution. And we became much more adept or much more interested, perhaps, in using our minds over using our body wisdom. In fact, sometimes it was use your head, not listen to your body. So It's not that we are not intuitive or not using our instinctual awareness anymore. We've just sort of relegated it to the back seat. So when the moon moves through Cancer, we get an opportunity to reinstitute it, right? To bring it back. What is the energy of the body telling you? Right? Go this direction, go that direction, don't eat that, what have you, those kinds of things. And of course, Cancer is represented by the crab. So we have an energy sometimes that is overly self-protective due to a feeling of vulnerability, perhaps from the level of sharing, of intimacy, of togetherness that can bring up that vulnerability, that sense that we might be criticized or judged for who we are, what we feel, what we're doing, what we're saying, how we look, all of those things, right? So Cancer is a sign then that is overly, in some cases, security oriented, or feels the need for that kind of stability before it can really share its fullness. And so when we're looking at the lower energy of Cancer, we see a lack of confidence. So that protection, right? This, I'm going to come at this sort of sideways. If you've ever watched a crab, what do? Right? As soon as they see a shadow or they feel your approach, they scurry under a rock if they can, or they scurry back out into the tide pool. That is the natural instinct of this particular animal, and that particular animal being the ruler of the sign. So we sort of see the connection that we have, for the energy of Cancer to be a little bit more protective, lacking a little bit of confidence, but also holding on to a little bit of that moody energy, right? The moon is the fastest moving body that we see in our sky. And we think then we connect our emotions and moods to the movement of the moon. And since the moon is the ruler of Cancer, it is affecting the sign of Cancer as well. Now, we also find defensiveness here in Cancer, right? What does a crab do if you get too close, right? Those big claws can come and just pinch, right? So defensiveness and that insecurity kind of energy. But we also have hiding here, hiding from a fear of not being accepted, hiding from a fear of, you name it, right? Fears. A lot of times in Cancer energy, it's rejection that we're afraid of, or abandonment. If I share my ideas with my full heart, you aren't going to accept me, so you're going to stop listening to me, or you're going to stop, participating in my group, or etc. Right? Those things. So hiding from fear out of a sense of insecurity. But then we also, on another level, have that smothering kind of energy that can come up with Cancer. Smothering as in taking nurturing and taking caregiving too far, right? Taking it and just, out of a fear that some harm might befall our children or the people that we love, we hold them very close, and we even can begin to smother them in. And then we can also try to make them dependent upon us. Those are choices that we've made as humans as well, where we sort of set it up so that in order for somebody to do anything, they have to come to us first, right? So we set them up to be dependent on us, or we can be overly dependent on others. So all of these kinds of issues coming up for the next few days, especially as the moon transitions a little bit later in the day today into the sign of Cancer. Now, right now, because we're in the void, there aren't any new connections. So you might feel a little bit like you're, maybe you don't have direction yet for the day or the week. You might feel tired. You might just feel sort of like, I'm just holding space, and that would be okay, right? Because that's the right thing. There's no need to push yourself into the beginning of something. Now, on top of that, we are also in what is called the balsamic moon. So the balsamic moon is the ending of the moon's cycle before we go into the new moon. So the new moon happens on Thursday, I believe it is the 28th. And these next few days while the moon is in Cancer and wandering a bit because it's at the end of the cycle, it's going to be a better time to go inward and to explore, what's been going on for you in this lunation cycle. And if there's any new information that you need to take action on from this cycle, not to necessarily take new action yet, however. So it is sort of a time of integrating, right? The next few days about integrating everything that's happening, everything that we've learned. And then because the integration is happening in Cancer, where is it that we may be overly protecting ourselves? Where is it that our emotions have run away with us? Our emotional needs overwhelming us in some way? Where do we have a heartfelt understanding of ourselves or others of what comes next? Because the new moon on Thursday is when the new begins. So we're kind of in that dark of the moon for the next couple of days that gives us that opportunity to access the inner realms, right? And access what we need to do from the inner planes. So kind of a more introspective time. But that new moon is going to be in Leo, and Leo, a sign that's very extroverted, very passionate, very demonstrative. And so the energy of the week will shift as we get into Thursday, moving into that new moon. So let's talk about the new moon because it's an interesting new moon to me because it holds a lot of potential. And yet I wonder how much of that potential will get expressed because there are a couple of transits within the new moon that feel like a little bit of laziness, right? And Leo kind of has that inborn lazy feeling to it. The big cats, what do the big cats do most of the time, right? Even my little cats, they sleep, right? Or they are just reclining and resting. But then when they need to eat or when they need to do something, their creative passion is stirred and then they take action. But because we also have these transits that are they're trines, and trine transits can sometimes be places where things are so easy that we don't try, right? We don't give our full effort at creating what it is that we want to create or doing what it is that we know needs to be done. We sort of just are half-heartedly engaged. And that is something that we'll have to address during the new moon as well. So let me see if there are any questions here. Good morning, Michelle and Kathy Miller. Good to see you. And Pam says, born on a balsamic moon in Scorpio. So you're familiar with this kind of thing throughout your whole life. Sylvester Miller, good to see you. And J-Lo says, so funny. I was speaking to my daughter about needing a push. She is a Leo. Indeed. Tanya, I only started liking Mondays when I had kids and they went to daycare on Mondays. That's funny. Nico Vasquez, good morning to you as well. And anyway, so if you have questions, you can certainly type those in there and I will come back. Let's talk about this new moon, though, because that's the biggest news of the week. And it also comes on the same day that Jupiter is turning retrograde. It's kind of a late turn for Jupiter. Last year it was in June, and this year we are retrograding at the end of July. So it takes us well into the end of the year before we get back to forward momentum with Jupiter energy. So overall, Jupiter turns retrograde. I got these times here earlier today. Let's see, retrograde at, holy moly, my eyes must be getting worse. There we go, 1:10 p.m. Pacific time. So 4:10 p.m. for those of you on the East Coast, and what would that be, about 8 or 9 o'clock at night for those of you in the European time zones, and later as you go further east that way. And then the new moon occurs at 10:55 a.m. Pacific time. So we have them changing fairly close to one another in terms of the impact of the planet's change. So when you look at the chart of the new moon, let's see, it should show me here that Jupiter is in retrograde. It does not. Why not? Oh, because I have this in different time zones. So when we're looking at the potential here for what this new moon might bring, it is taking us on a journey back inward for growth and expansion. When Jupiter is in direct mode, we're growing, expanding in the outer world, right? The realm. So we need to broaden our horizons from the outside, right? Now, with Jupiter switching to the inner realms, we're learning to expand our inner awareness, expand our inner gifts to see things more clearly from the inside. So it's not that it won't be a time of optimism or so things like that, but instead of outer world things triggering optimism, it will be something that we need to have from within us. So we're going back and forth between the expression of the outer world growth and where we're expanding our lives, but now we're moving inward. And this particular new moon is going to be sitting at 5 degrees 38 minutes of Leo. And Leo is a very extroverted sign, even though there are introspective tendencies, but Leo expresses them in direction in what they do in the outer world. So they're very outer world oriented. But here now we have Jupiter pushing us to go inward and set the path for growth from inside of ourselves. So it might be a time where we want to push outward. What's that saying where we go 2 steps forward, 1 step backward kind of thing? So for the next few months, we may be waffling back and forth between the outer expression of growth and having to hold back and work on ourselves from the inside first. Now, some of you may have Jupiter already retrograde from birth. A lot of you do because Jupiter spends 4 months in retrograde. So that's a good chunk of the year for some of you to really have been born with that activated in your own chart. So this might be a time of expression of all of the inner growth that's been taking place in your outer world. So it's kind of upside down for those of you with Jupiter retrograde. Now, Jupiter is retrograding in the sign of Aries, and Aries is a sign of action. It's ruled by Mars. So I also keyed into a feeling of frustration that might be coming up for some of us, as those steps that you want to take, those actions that you want to initiate may be slowed down somewhat with Jupiter now moving into that retrograde phase. So maybe these next few days might be time to really get done some of the things that you want to get done, knowing that once things shift, it's going to be a more internalized process of that growth and expansion. But Jupiter in this new moon will be in a very favorable aspect to the sun and the moon and the goddess planet Ceres, dwarf planet Ceres. And that brings up some interesting things too that we'll talk about. But for right now, let's deal with that trine, shall we? So a trine is a 120-degree angle or relationship between the planets, and it connotes ease, kind of a grace in the energy exchange, right? They are in like elements. The sun, moon and Ceres in Leo, fire, and then Jupiter in Aries, also fire. So they're in like elements. They understand one another. But again, this brings up a bit of that laziness, right? The lazy internalized processes of Jupiter's growth. Not pushing ourselves perhaps to expand too far outward. And not that I think anybody should be pushing, but we may hold back a part of ourselves thinking that maybe we've done enough. Maybe there's no more need for me to do anything else, right? So be watchful for that in your own life. Is also, Jupiter and Chiron are fairly close to one another. At least during this new moon, there's about 8-degree separation here, but Chiron exerts a pretty powerful punch in terms of learning the lessons of independence, of interdependence, of taking right action, and moving forward with your heart's desires is the big key theme that we see here. And moving forward with your own heart's desires means also taking right action. But it might be hard to determine what what the next right action might be, because everything has turned internal, right? Everything will be turning internal. So you might have to do some meditation. You might have to do some contemplation. You might have to sit back and relax, be a little bit more quiet, get an idea from your type and your strategy, what comes next, and then don't be afraid to take action. I think that's sometimes where we break down, right? We break down because the next steps aren't taken, right? We go so far and then we go, maybe this is enough. Enough is enough, right? Yeah. But then if I had just taken one more step, I would have gone into greatness, or I would have gone into extra beauty or extra ease of getting something done. So don't sit back on your laurels so much, but also take, kind of your clues, your cues from your internal focus on what it is that you need to do next. Now, there's also some excitement with this new moon, as there is a separate transit going on of Mercury in a square to Uranus. And this is all a lead up to some very powerful Uranus energy coming up as we end the month of July and begin the month of August. So it's sort of the beginning, if you will, right, of some of this very maybe tumultuous, maybe conflicting, maybe exciting sort of energy coming up with Uranus. And I'm saying it's excitement, but with a Mercury retrograde sort of feel, right? Mercury is not retrograde, but you know how when you're trying to do things with a Mercury retrograde, you have to kind of like check and recheck to make sure everything's working the way you think it should be. You have to be sort of open to the unexpected things that can happen during a Mercury retrograde. Well, Mercury in a square to Uranus is sort of like that, right? They're in the sign of Taurus, or let's see, Mercury's in Leo and Uranus in Taurus. So we have earth and we have fire. So we might have scorched earth, right? We might have scorched earth. We might have sudden and unexpected changes, or sudden and unexpected responses from others to the things that we're doing, or that we respond that way to others and what they're doing. So there can be upsetting messages. The news cycle, I'm sure, will be an interesting one, as Mercury rules the news and the information. The news cycle may be with upsetting news or things that maybe create tension or anxiety for us as a collective. Doesn't necessarily have to be that way. Could be super exciting, like out of the normal kind of excitement. We could also have or get engaged in a battle of the minds, because Mercury rules our lower mind. That would be the thinking, analyzing, judging, critical sort of part of our mind, memory details, all that kind of stuff, right? That's Mercury territory. But Uranus rules the higher mind. So the inspirational mind, right? The ideas and the possibilities mind. And if we can connect to the higher mind and allow that flow of maybe excitement, but maybe inspiration to come in to the lower mind, we might have some, real exciting or unique or innovative things that come up for us. On the other hand, we could end up with the battle for control, the mind trying to keep, a great control on the creative processes or whatever it is that we're doing in our relationships, in our work, in our finances, in our health, you name it, right? So we'll have to watch out for that kind of mind energy. And the mind the mind has a lot of power, and we give it a lot of power. We choose to give it a lot of power. And when we have a new moon in the sign of Leo, we have the sun in Leo, the moon in Leo, Ceres in Leo, Mercury in Leo. The mind is needing to yield to the creative and imagination energy. But will it? right? Or do we end up in this, internalized struggle between the things we think and the things that our hearts want us to do, the direction our hearts want us to go? Are we going to feel the fear between the mind and the heart? So alignment will be necessary. This is going to be a great time for us to really align with our passions, take our mind and put it at our behest and not on its own, kind of creating out there some crazy things, kind of rein it in, lasso it, bring it in, right? Who's thinking your thoughts anyway, right? Are they just things that are random coming in that you don't have any control over? So we'll want to really watch what our minds are focused on. Use your mind for your benefit and not letting it run away and scare the hell out of you for whatever reason. For pursuing your passion, for pursuing your desires or what you really love, right? This is a time for us to pursue what we really love, what we really want. Now, miscommunication can also be a part of this between people, right? Between people. I think what we really need to learn for this new moon is how to be flexible and adaptable to as we move forward to changing circumstances, right? If we're following our heart, sometimes it might not be logical. It might not feel logical to go out and do something or to go out and buy something or to be something that you've never been before. And the mind is going to probably kick up a fuss about it. But the mind is yours, right? To do with as you will. Use it for yourself. Be open-minded. That is going to be one of the things that could be an antidote to a heavy mindset, is to be open-minded, not take in all the thoughts and allow them to stranglehold what you do or who you are. That allow yourself to be that adaptable and flexible. Now, we do want to sort of watch out for scattered thinking as well. The square from Mercury to Uranus can be fritzing out, if you will. There's a lot of high energy coming into the minds, right? Into our thinking, inspiration and possibilities and all of that. And for some of us, it can be a feeling of being scattered or losing focus. So we might also need to do a lot of work around keeping ourselves out of our heads, into our bodies. And, sometimes we just have to walk away from something we're working on if our minds get too much in it, and then come back to it in a little bit. Okay, so what was the time of the new moon? The new moon occurs at 1:55 p.m. East Coast time, or 1:54 p.m. East Coast time. That will be 10:54 our time on the West Coast. And for Europe, that's going to be Universal Time 17:55 or 17:54, so 5:54 p.m. So we're all having the new moon on the same day, unless, of course, you're in Australia and beyond the date line. So what else is going on? The one thing I kind of noticed is that if you look at the chart, I draw the chart up and I set it for Washington, D.C., because that's the capital of the USA. It's just the country I live in, right? So I set it for the Eastern time zones. In the Eastern time zones, and likely in the Western time zones too, I should check that and see if that holds true. The part of fortune where we can find the most joy is at 8 degrees of Scorpio, and that puts it in an inconjunct or a quincunx to Jupiter. And like they are within just like 10 minutes of each other. So they're very close, right? Very close. So it made me think about how everything that we do in our lives, our evolution of consciousness, or what should be our evolution of consciousness, is all about self-mastery, right? Scorpio, a Scorpio part of fortune, self-mastery. And the, passion is also there in Scorpio. And it is a sign that can sometimes see through to the depths of something. And so seeing through to the depths of one's self, seeing through to the depths of one's motivations, can be very difficult when Jupiter energy is causing us to just keep our jets spinning in new directions. So, you know how some of you who are generator types, during our conversations in your reading, we talk about how the generators grow, right? There's this path upward, and then we come to a plateau, right, where things seem to come to a slowdown, a stop. It seems like all the energy kind of goes away from something, and we feel like, oh no, now I need to quit, right? So there's this stair step kind of energy that happens where we're growing, we integrate, we grow again, we integrate. That is all in the interest of mastery, right? Self mastery. Because if you're always growing, if that's all we ever did, it would be runaway growth. Runaway growth is kind of cancer, kind of tumors, right? There's a negative connotation of runaway growth in the human body, but also in our lives, right? Doing too much, going too far too fast, overindulging, over imbibing, over promising something, right? So Jupiter can be very involved in our keeping the evolutionary spiral going when it's in the positive, but it can also keep us spinning our wheels and trying to keep growing and growing rather than taking the time to integrate everything. So part of this new moon is going to include that in conjunct, which means we have to adjust something in our lives. We have to adjust to how does what's going on in the world or what's been going on in our own lives lead us to mastery, right? How does all of that lead us to mastery? And then also the Mercury Uranus square that we've just spoken about is also going to be squaring Mars and the North Node, as that's the next big transit that occurs. We talked somewhat about it on Friday. That is a conjunction of the North Node and Uranus and Mars, and that happens between the 31st and August 1st. So literally not in activation at the new moon, but very close to being activated. And in fact, it's being activated by that Mercury Uranus square. So it seems like the time period coming up is going to be a lot about how do we move forward? How do we stay flexible? How do we get out of that closed-minded, narrow-minded thinking? We have to open up ourselves in some way, right? We have to see things differently. And I also noted in this new moon the goddesses, right? The goddesses are activated. And let's talk about Ceres first. A Ceres is actually connected to the new moon. She is at 2 degrees, 15 minutes of Leo, and the moon and the sun will be at 5 degrees, 38 minutes of Leo. And that means they're very close together. And Ceres is sort of the goddess of the harvest. And she has a very powerful connection to food, right? To agriculture, to crops and the harvest, right? In statues or pictures of her, you often see her holding the sheaf of wheat because she's very much about how we feed ourselves, how we take care of our earth, how we nurture and how we plant and how we take care of all of that. How do we feed everybody? Now that she's in Leo, and I don't know what day she switched, but it couldn't have been too far back, right? Just recently. It makes me wonder if we aren't going to see some kind of blowback, let's say, from our poor farming habits and impacts from things like um, lack of water in some areas, or the use of genetically modified crops, uh, all these kinds of things that to Ceres as a mother goddess is going to feel very unnatural to her, right? She's very much going to be showing us where we have fallen out of sync with natural rhythms and cycles, with natural ways of living in balance with the planet, right? So maybe experiencing issues of I'm trying to play nice here because she can easily bring up famine. She can easily exacerbate drought. And, from at least the Western US has been under a massive drought for a while. And I'm not saying these are, problems that we created, like global warming. People would have you think that, the human population has had a lot to do with it. I'm not saying we haven't contributed, but the earth is also a living, breathing, dynamic entity. And I think sometimes we kind of circumvent any of her own power and we try to steal that power back. Like if we plant things and we use pesticides and we use growth hormones and all of that, that we can get a higher yield from a crop. And over time, again, that ends up undermining, leading to famine or leading to less productivity or leading to problems, right? Killing off animals and insects and so forth. So I'm being careful here because we have to strike that balance, right? We have to be able to grow enough food to feed enough people. And that means we have to be able to take care of insects and we have to be able to watch for, making sure we have enough water, etc. But we tend to go overboard. And because Uranus and the North Node and Mars are in Taurus, a sign that is naturally associated with the earth, with agriculture, with crops and the growing of crops, the reaping of the harvests, we might have that sting of higher prices for crops and things like that because of our poor farming practices. So the high side of all of that is that maybe we can become more innovative, right? Uranus is there, certainly. Maybe we have innovative ways of dealing with things, problems that we've been experiencing. But those problems, those innovative ideas are often going to be triggered by problems that show up first, right? So we have some kind of challenge, we have to rise to the occasion. So I think Ceres being involved here is bringing that more and more in focus, where we can see that our excesses have harmed the planet or have, blown up in our faces, so to speak. And we need to adopt something new, something innovative to be able to sustainably farm, sustainably supply people with water, etc. All right, so if you guys have questions about that, let me know. The other goddesses involved are Venus and the Black Moon Lilith. Venus will be at 12 degrees 55 minutes of Cancer, and the Black Moon Lilith at 11 degrees 41 minutes of Cancer. They are very close to one another. Venus bringing us, the energy of love, but also living according to our values. It might involve money and being more protective of our money. And the Black Moon Lilith brings us the shadow part of that, the part that we don't see in ourselves. And here it might be where we're acting from fear, where we're acting from an oversized sense of self-protection, and or where we have a fear that we're going to be rejected or a fear of abandonment underneath, right? These are big human kinds of fears that may be underneath everything for us, and that can cause us to stray from our stated values, right? So that comes up during this new moon as well. And they are in a semi-sextile. They, as in Venus and the Black Moon Lilith, are in a semi-sextile, a 30-degree relationship with Pallas Athena at 11 degrees 15 minutes of Gemini. And remember, she's the goddess of freedom. She's the goddess that brings that sort of spiritual warriorship to play. And she's in a sign of communication, a new message. I cannot, I did this on Friday, but I cannot help but see that behind everything is our need to revise our communication, how we speak about things, right? How we talk about truth, how we talk about things that are going on in our world, how we talk about things personally in our lives. And instead of the focus, like we talked about it as being, in this country, I don't know about other countries, but we have a Department of Defense, so very Cancer, right? And we don't have a Department of Peace, right? Everything is kind of built around the military and war machine and warmongering, but yet one of our stated values is peace. And how can we have peace when everything is built around war, right? Or built around defending ourselves from war? So I feel like underneath it all, Pallas Athena might be, stimulating our awareness of the impact that our words are having on the reality we're creating, and the need for us then to reword everything, right? Take a look at what you say before you say it, preferably, right? Before you say it. So that's also a part of all of this. So it's kind of, Jupiter definitely in this, still bringing us optimism and good fortune, still being able to show us the path of growth, especially though from a spiritually inner world focus, but just being stressed a bit by either our overuse of that optimism or overdoing things, but also the need then to rein ourselves in somewhat to be more masterful. And then if we look at the sun and the moon in human design for this particular time period, the new moon, we'll see that that is going to happen at the gate 31, and including Ceres, she is also at the gate 31. And that is a gate called leadership, right? So we're going to dig into that in just a minute here, because it's also where we start the new human design week today, with the sun at 31 and the earth at gate 41. But before I go there, let's look at any questions that might be coming up here. Hi, Tom. It's good to see you. Tanya, just realized the sun is conjunct my natal Jupiter retrograde tomorrow. All good things, fortunate things, right? Then transiting Jupiter goes retrograde Thursday. What could that mean? Well, now that growth and opportunity that has been going on outside turns inward, and your focus becomes very inward. What do I have to change on the inside of me in order to be who I want to be in the outer world? So that's what that would mean. Tom, better late than never. I'm here. Okay, wait. Let's keep going here, because I thought I saw a question from Tom. Let's see. The last time this Uranus and C conjunction C. What's the C? North Node, Uranus, Mars conjunction is what we were looking at. Happened in 324 BC at the time of Alexander the Great. He was undefeated in battle. And I think you. I'm not sure what you're talking about there, Tom, because that's not true. This is something that happens. It did happen more recently than that. And I was just looking at that too. And I want to say it was in the 80s, perhaps. So I'll do that research for us and bring that back for us on Friday. Russia bombing Ukrainian port that exports wheat worldwide. There you have that, right? That's one big problem, or could turn into one big problem. And Tom, please describe the Sabian symbol for this Uranus thing. The Sabian symbol is a newly formed continent. Sounds like the return of Lemuria or Atlantis, maybe. I did not look up the Sabian symbol for the Uranus thing, but I did look up the Sabian symbol for the new moon. To me, that is, what we really want to be looking at. And I would say a newly formed continent. So a continent being a land mass, right? Maybe equating to a mass of people, right? A community of people, or the collective, right? A newly arising or newly formed collective, perhaps. Certainly no rising of another continent, at least not on the horizon that we can see. Barring any, major earthquake, pole shift kind of things that are possible, not probable, but you never know, right? We never know. But what I would see then is more like um, a rising of a new collective, right? A new focus for people. We'll see. We'll see what happens here. Um, but let's take a look real quick at the Sabian symbol before I dive into the human design aspect. If we look at the Sabian symbol for the new moon, which we'd have to read 9 degrees. Oops, you're not the one I wanted. We would have to look at 9 degrees of Leo. So, in the Sabian symbols, you always look at 1 degree ahead of the degree you want, because it starts at 0, right? Not 1. So what we have there is glass blowers shape beautiful vases with their controlled breathing. Doesn't that sound like sort of intention, creative energy, and being intentional with our creative energy? And the keynote says the need to involve one's most spiritual and vital energies in the creative act if it is to produce significant and beautiful new forms. So creativity in becoming intentional, and it's so in alignment with our human design this week, because the earth, the challenge, right? She brings up the challenge is in the gate of imagination, the gate 41. When we look at 41, it's the beginning of the human design year, right? The gate 41 starts the human design year, and it ends up being that energy starts with creativity, right? It starts with being able to imagine, to see something beyond what you have, right? To in the words of John Lennon, imagine all the people, right? Imagine peace. Imagine that we have a utopian world going on. But it can't just start with imagination and end with imagination. And this is where right action comes into play during this moon, is that imagination and envisioning, fantasy are all just the beginning of something, right? The 41 jumps over to the 30, and the 30 sits on the emotional solar plexus, while the 41 sits at the root center. The root center, remember, is sending a pulse of energy out into the world, and it sends the pulse of energy of imagination outward to the emotional center. And the emotional center fields the emotional and the creative energy. And at the gate 30, which is sometimes called the gate of desire, but in quantum human design, it's now the gate of passion. It is imagination that sparks our passion, that leads us to take steps toward abundance, or toward our life path, or toward expressing our creative energy. So while the gate 41 is this wonderful energy for imagination, and that's important, it has to be connected with the steps that we take, or else it goes nowhere, right? It goes nowhere fast. So if we want to live in an abundant world, we have to use our imaginations, right? We have to be able to envision something more than what we have. If you ever look up the definition for peace, it really says it's the absence of war. Really? Is that all in our imagination that we can come up for as a definition of peace? So this is why I'm saying we need new definitions, we need new words, we need to be able to envision something more than what we have had in the past, but we have to take steps towards it. We can't just sit in the imagination. We have to take the right action. And right action for you, if you're a generator or a manifesting generator, is that it is showing up in your outer world. The next step is revealed because it shows up in the outer world. You take that step and you have full faith that the next step will show up. If you are a projector, you are fielding life's invitations, right? It could be a person that the universe uses to invite you into something. It could be a glance, a look that passes between you and another person. It could be a literal invite coming in the mail, coming in your email that says, I invite you to. but life for you invites you in. And if you are a manifester, you are using your creative energy intentionally based on whatever your authority is. So, for example, some of you might, if you're manifestors, you might have ego awareness or ego manifested authority, which means you're doing what your heart or your will brings to you to do. If you are a reflector, of course, you're waiting and seeing the reflection of your truth through others that are around you in your life and in your world. So that is the Earth this week, while the Sun is sitting at the gate 31. And the gate 31 is the gate of democratic leadership. And this is not democratic as in a movement or a party. This is democratic as this is leadership, supported leadership, right? That needs recognition. And I don't mean recognition like I see you, you're a great leader. I mean recognition as in you've been voted in or you've been promoted or by consensus, a group has asked you to lead. It is projected energy. So gate 31 is on the identity center and it leads up to the throat center. Did I just get that wrong? The gate 31 is on the throat center leading down to the identity center where the gate 7 was just hit by the sun a couple of weeks ago, where we were learning about how the support behind leadership. But now we're looking at the leader itself, the leader being supported by people, being recognized as the leader by vote or by people consensus. And it holds the potential. A good leader isn't an authoritarian, doesn't engage in power grabs. It is a leader that holds the potential for bringing humanity together in unity or bringing a body of people together in unity for a purpose, right? A purpose and a passion for people coming together, right? In with purpose and passion to perform a task or to run a business, to run a country, a government. So the leader is not someone that seizes power. It is a responsibility built in humbleness because you've been granted power by the people to lead them in whatever the people's will is, right? When you look at the Constitution of the US and likely other countries too, that that's one of the values that's set forth in the constitutions or in their important paperwork in what they set the country up to be, right? But they got away from it, right? They move away from it as power corrupts and leaders begin to feel like they have power, and power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. And so we see that in this gate. So it holds the potential for unity when we come together with a leader that unites instead of divides and leads us into a brilliant future, right? Using their personal genius. Now, that can happen for all of us too, in the different ways in which we might be seen as leaders, right? In our families, in our communities, in our work or our workplaces. All of those things might be places where you can shine as a leader. All right. So, I think that is pretty much it for me today. Let's see. I'm going to take one last look around here. Erica, I just read that monarch butterfly is now endangered. Oh, wow, wow. Regenerative gardening. I bet you could talk to us a lot about that. Christine, my great grandfather, Ronald McDonald from Nova Scotia, was a creative glass blower. I'll take this as a sign from my ancestors. And isn't it interesting? There's a new show on Netflix about glass blowing. I mean, right? It's right there. The patience it takes to blow glass, right? To make it creative. Anyway, let's draw a couple cards, shall we? Just for the week. And I think I want an animal spirit card. And I feel like we need a starseed card, starseed oracle. Let's take a look. So this will be for everyone. And this is a deck, the Spirit Animal Oracle by Colette Baron Reed. So Colette does a lot. She has a lot of the decks that I have are from her, and I just love them. She also talks about words and their power. We have Swan Spirit, time for a deep dive, and that is card number 60, which is a 6, the higher level 6. And Swan Spirit, but when I pulled it out, it was upside down, so in protection. So let's see what Swan is sharing with us for this week. So don't talk yourself into diving deep into something just because you see the potential of things instead of what they really are now. The necessary work and patience involved may not be the best use of your energy. Have you seen the potential in someone and think that if you love and support them, they will become the person who knows you love them beyond all others? Have you stepped into an opportunity that you know feels too good to be true and might not turn out the way you hope? Now is not a time for selective, limited perception that can lead to misjudgment. Instead, this is a time for going deep and being honest about what you find as you explore the depths. Have no fear, for whatever you find below will help you love and understand yourself and others and make better choices. Can you sense Swan Spirit calling you to dive deep and resurface to choose again? That sounds a lot like Jupiter retrograde, right? So, Swan Spirit. Now, let's see what our star seed oracle tells us. And this is by Rebecca Campbell. The artwork on these cards is by Danielle Noel, the star seed oracle. And here we get double mission. Ooh, that sounds Gemini-ish. Lightworker starseed, serve the world by being you. So we have a double mission, right? Let's see what that's about. I don't think we've gotten this card before. And double mission. Okay, here's what it says. Lightworker starseeds are mission and purpose oriented. Many have the feeling that time's running out and there's something they came here to do, create, or contribute. They're here to grow as souls individually, an individual mission, and also to contribute to the planet in some action-oriented way, a collective mission. Their collective mission is often answered through a career calling or by devoting their life to something bigger. Until they remember their collective mission, it can feel as if something's missing or that they're forgetting something important. It's common for lightworker starseeds to feel that they're different, and they may carry soul memories of being visible or sharing their voice. As such, they may protect themselves by dimming their light in order to fit in, or by spending time in some sort of closet, such as a spiritual closet. If you pull this card, you're being called to remember your collective mission and step into it even more fully. You're being reminded that your role as a light worker is to light up the world with your presence. This doesn't have to be a great big thing or a decision you need to make. You also don't need to have a great big plan. If you resonate with being a light worker, all you need to do is work out what lights you up, your passions and joys, right? And keep doing that. When you trust and follow the simple path of things that light you up and then lose yourself in the doing, you'll light up the world without even trying. Here's your starseed soul inquiry. How can you serve the world by being you? How can you serve the world by being you? All right. I don't know. It's a good question, right? That is it for me today, guys. I hope you all have a wonderful week. And I will see you on Friday, where we'll dive deeper into the Uranus-Mars-North Node coming together, the conjunction. And maybe we'll take a look at a couple of charts as well and see how that's affecting us personally. All right. Take care, everybody. Thank you for joining me. Bye for now.